thank you both for that no-pressure introduction. For those of you who were raised in the Presbyterian Church like I was, you should think of me as that unnecessary benediction while your mind is really focused on how to get out the door fast and be the first to get out of the parking lot. And for those of you not raised in the church, I'm the last thing between you and the martinis. So, let me begin by saying that as a native North Carolinian, I am always happy to be back in a part of the country where I don't have to explain to anybody here that grown men who call their fathers daddy do so out of emotional strength rather than mental deficiency. Where true hope cuisine, as we know, is a plate of barbecue, a side of hush puppies, a jar of sweet tea, and a Krispy Kreme donut. And where the three most important words in the English language, especially during March Madness, are anybody but dude. I know the dude grants because I see the veins bulge on their foreheads every time I say that. I'm especially delighted to be here as part of this celebration of Rich Whittington. Nothing could mean more to me, and to be among so many art supporters in a region that we have always known has been deeply dedicated and supportive of the arts. Long before my hometown of High Point became known not only as the furniture capital of the world, but as the home of Fantasia Barrino, the American Idol. North Carolina had distinguished itself by embracing the arts, insisting that all the arts, performing, visual, and literary, would be in every public school curriculum. North Carolina was where the nation's first outdoor drama was held in Manteo. North Carolina was the home of the first local arts council in the United States in Winston-Salem, and the nation's first public arts conservatory, the North Carolina School for the Arts. Through the series we used to have called Community Concerts. Before I was 10 years old at the High Point College, now High Point University Auditorium, I had seen the violinist Isaac Stern, I had seen the San Francisco Ballet, I had seen the Vienna Boys Choir, and I was encouraged time and again to see whether I might have any artistic talent. Like many of you, I sang in the church choir at the First Presbyterian Church, albeit in High Point. I sang in the chorus of Andrews High School. I learned to mold clay and paint pictures using that tempura paint that came in juice cans at Kirkman Park. Yeah, preach it, brother, yeah. And I made my theatrical debut at Jack and Jill Elementary as the caboose and the little engine that could, in a performance that those of us lucky enough to see it still call it definitive. But throughout my life here, I thought of Greensboro as the big city. Greensboro had the Four Seasons Mall and the hotel where my senior prom was held. Greensboro had a Krispy Kreme on Battleground that stayed open all night. Greensboro had Ike and Tina at the Greensboro Coliseum and foreign movies at the Janus Theater. And Greensboro was where I waited tables in 1980 with identical gay triplets named James, Jeff, and Joe, whose drag rendition of We Are Family was legendary long before RuPaul. And where nightly, lock-jawed socialites with pageant hair would stride in the front door at Giovanni's and say, I want a triplet for a waiter. What Greensboro did not have was a year-round, not-for-profit professional resident theater company. A theater that would regularly bring the great works by Ibsen and Shaw or Williams and Miller, that would bring musicals like Man of La Mancha and South Pacific or My Fair Lady or Pump Boys and Dinettes. A theater, and I say this with some anger as a Southerner, a theater that would be a living rebuke to people who thought of the South only as the Beverly Hillbillies and Gomer Pyle, and to a media that even today thinks the fastest way to signal prejudice and ignorance is by giving a character a Southern accent. You know it. A theater that instead would nurture and celebrate the stories of the South, told by the South, for the South, recognizing that our stories as Southerners have dignity and meaning and worth. A theater that would recognize that our community's fullest diversity is our strength if and only if we have the will to face and own and take responsibility for our past and collectively build our new future together, and that therefore would embrace as a core responsibility not just Ibsen and Miller, but bringing the voices of August Wilson and Katori Hall, the stories of Pearl Johnson and the Mississippi Delta, the music of Fats Waller and Ethel Waters, the histories of the Delaney sisters, and the Trail of Tears to an audience in Greensboro who was hungry to hear them. Greensboro did not have such a theater until it had Preston Lane, a bad boy from Boone, coming home to roost, and Rich Whittington, a Texas transplant with an unfortunate idea that barbecue involved ribs and tomato sauce. I hope he has converted with time. These two Yale expats looked at an abandoned Montgomery Ward store and saw a home for a community where others had seen only ruin and decay. They knocked on every door they could find and discovered openness and warmth and generosity and support. And they enlisted people like all of you here today to go on a journey together, not only for the plays that they would see, but for the sake of their children, their city, and their lives. You know, frankly, those of us who are watching from the National Theater scene watched Rich and Preston's arrival with a lot more than a little trepidation, and me probably foremost among them. You know, cities the size of Greensboro do not support a theater unless it is directly underwritten and part of a university, for the most part. Many theaters depend on bread and butter on a very high tourist trade and an already existing deep professional pool of actors and directors that have already contributed to the development of public taste, neither of which were the case when they arrived. And location notwithstanding, theater it's hard. It's hard. For those of you who don't know, theater is a field that works with negative working capital, where what you pay in tickets typically covers only 36% of the cost of operations, where last year only 53% of theaters in this country broke even, and to balance the budget, the theater the size of Triad Stage has to raise $24,732 in contributions every week, 52 weeks a year, and when the year ends, it starts all over again on day one of week 53. Moreover, Rich and Preston launched their dreams, not only, as you've heard, with 9/11 and various catastrophes coming down the pike, but in a moment when theater as a discipline was undergoing seismic shifts. It was a time when we saw the onslaught of hundreds of cable channels, and Netflix, and video games, and social media, and the internet, and home entertainment systems, and that little portable home entertainment system called the iPhone, all of which were clamoring for a piece of leisure time. The subscriptions on which theaters had been built were already showing signs of strain, and organized philanthropy, as you've heard, was shifting its funds away from the arts to other social trends, a trend that has grown only worse with time. Trends no one in this field yet knows how to master. In that light, what you two have done is nothing short of miraculous. Triad Stage, and Rich in particular, arrived not just with stories of plays they would do, but with a vision of the economic redevelopment of downtown Greensboro, and made this place a linchpin in turning an increasing ghost town corridor into a rejuvenated home for restaurants and retail. You know, yeah. You probably know, he probably said it to you 100 times. Every dollar spent on a performing arts ticket generates $5 to $7 more for the local economy. Yes, money spent on parking and on restaurants, and the fabric store where you buy the fabrics for the costume, and the hardware store where you buy the lumbers and the nails for the set, on and on and on. And cultural districts promote vital urban life and public safety. And I'm here to tell you, downtown Greensboro would not be what it is today were it not for Triad Stage, Preston Lane, and Rich Whittington. Triad Stage came with a vision of what they would do for your children, whether through student matinees or family performances or internships, through walk-on roles or summer theater camp, that they would not only open new worlds of imagination, but they would contribute to your children greater confidence, greater self-esteem, greater verbal acuity, greater tolerance of ambiguity. They would teach them teamwork and discipline and collaboration that would flower into academic success and dedication, but even more, they would give them joy. They would give them the sense of belonging. They would give them a community based not in competition, but in mutual understanding and in empathy and heart. And they came with a vision that they would forge new paths in crossing artistically across the racial and economic divides that all too often paralyze a community, pioneering new ways in which we just listen to each other and understand, how we share the same space, to breathe the same air, to laugh and to ache with one another. A leadership role that's hard for some audiences to embrace, but it's a testament to their integrity, their commitment, their community values in the broadest sense, and to their vision of the future. You know, you've heard a lot of great stories about Rich already. What you didn't, some of which I'm going to repeat, some of which you haven't heard. Stories about his work in Dallas, the partnership at Yale, the 126 productions, the hundreds of thousands of tickets, the accolades from readers' polls and critics, and the North Carolina Theater Conference and American Theater Magazine, the grants from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Schubert Foundation, and most especially, which I don't think you heard enough about, Rich's generosity in promoting not just Triad Stage, but the entire North Carolina theater field, and his availability and mentoring to students at UNCG, A&T, and Greensboro College, and of course, his willingness to don a wig and a corset if it will sell tickets. You know, but what I want to acknowledge, for those of you who don't work in the theater, is we often don't appreciate the toll this takes to do, both physically and personally, to get it done. You know, some of you will watch the Tonys tomorrow night, or you probably watch the Oscars, and you'll see that we have awards for actors and designers and composers, but we rarely celebrate the managers. We overlook the fact that every set piece, every costume, every actor who walks out on that stage, every piece of publicity, every staff salary, every upholstery, fabric swatch on the seats are there only because someone went out and raised the money to make it real. And in Triad Stage, that person is Rich Whittington. You know, all of this represents hours and even years of patient cultivation. Grants do especially. Long hours, travel, typically crammed into the back row of coach class, getting up before dawn and returning before midnight to avoid a hotel charge, or staying at the closest thing you can find to a YMCA in Manhattan. You know, meeting annual costs means in a theater stretching every dime to a breaking point and pulling proverbial rabbits out of hats every time you turn around. And on the occasion when that isn't enough, you make visits to the banks for lines of credits and managing debt. It's a day that begins with breakfast meetings with donors. It continues nonstop with staff meetings and government affairs meetings and production meetings. It takes a break for lunch with more donors. It reassembles with publicity release and website design. It continues into the afternoon with more meetings, and then it involves staying to greet the audiences in the evening as they arrive for the performance, and culminates with having stayed long enough to thank them for coming and hearing how they felt about the play. For Rich, no job has been too basic or granular for him to tackle. He has been the de facto super, climbing the ladder to clean the gutters, entering the elevator pit. I wish you had the swimsuit picture. Big bucks. I'll do an auction for the swimsuit picture. And will retire any debt you might have, to clean the sump pump, and he's even been known to tumble down the aisles while he's been changing seating lights. And everyone says he's the first to help with tech and load-in. But especially for those of you who run businesses with department heads, I want you to hear what Rich has also been. Rich has been the CFO. Rich has been the lobbyist. Rich has been the chief development officer. Rich has been the major gifts fundraiser. Rich has been the co-architect of the annual budget. Rich has been the head of financial strategy. Rich has been the supervisor of marketing. Rich has been the supervisor of communications. Rich has been the primary link to the board. Rich has been the overseer of professional staff development, and especially in times of seismic change, Rich has been the chief innovator and the leader who has to steer blind and lead in times of uncertainty and confusion and resistance to change. I swear to God, I don't know how you've done it. I really, truly don't. and how you have stayed the course so long, and how you have done this with hope and optimism and warmth and humor and patience and courage. But you have done it, and you have gained the infinite respect and admiration from your colleagues across the state and across the country who know you. And I want to say, in the same vein that you did to your wife Courtney and to your sons Michael and Ben, not to mention Tex and Ella, who did not understandably get a meeting tonight, I want to add special thanks to you three, or you five, and special thanks for the countless missed breakfasts and dinners, the school events, the family outings, including most recently the Easter that was interrupted by a leaky pipe at the theater, all of which were put on hold because your dad needed to be here. Whatever attracts you next, and I know you love Greensboro so much that I hope it's going to be here, I hope you will find, truly, the time you talked about of breathing differently and those weekends to have more times with those you love, because you're leaving enormous shoes to fill. You deserve every tribute tonight, the painting, the award, the naming, and more. But as I close, I want to say the ultimate tribute actually begins tonight, because it will be measured in your ongoing support of Triad Stage and this thing he has helped create. For some of you, the ongoing importance of Triad Stage in promoting economic vitality is going to be more than enough reason to continue. For others, the way the Triad Stage is shaping your children and an emerging generation, teaching them not just how to express themselves, but how to listen deeply. Listening deeply, that's really what this thing is about. That's going to be more than enough. For others of you, the role Triad Stage is playing in building an inclusive Greensboro, transcending divisions of race and gender and class, is more than enough. For others, the way it expands your perceptual horizons and the role in your awareness of others, or the role it plays in your social life. You come because you love doing it with friends. That will be more than enough. But I hope for everybody here, you'll continue to support Triad because you've had an experience of sitting in this auditorium. The lights have gone up, a human voice has begun to speak, and your life has been changed. When you meet your life in a great poem, the poet Jane Hirschfield once wrote, or a great work of art, your life becomes expanded, extended, clarified, magnified, deepened in color, deepened in feeling. I hope that each one of you has met your life at Triad Stage, and that here you have felt the shock of recognition and found joy, delight, inspiration, affirmation, hope, and depth. Years ago, I heard a story from Fred Adams, who is the longtime artistic director of the Utah Shakespeare Festival. You know, as a young Mormon, Fred spent the obligatory year or two ministering to others the story of the Church of Latter-day Saints. Fred was actually assigned not to Uganda, for those of you that know Book of Mormon, but instead to Norway, land of trolls, where the combination of language barrier, darkness, and cold made the experience dispiriting, to say the least. In a region where darkness falls before 3 p.m., there were many days when the knock on the door would be followed by an unfailingly polite invitation to step inside, blank looks at the stories of the Mormon, and then Norwegian folk songs sung at great length, accompanied by odd alcohol and mysteriously prepared fish. You know, one such night was dispiriting enough, but months of them began to take its toll, and one night was particularly hard. The snow was especially deep, and as Fred and his companions struggled up a fjord to get back to their lodgings, Fred found himself angry and depressed. He had never been colder or more tired or wetter. Never had his life seemed more dispiriting and his quest more futile. But suddenly his companion grabbed his arm and tugged it and said, "Fred, Fred, look up, look up." And there, above them in its entire splendor, was the aurora borealis, shimmering in the night, exploding in color, reminding him of the deeper, profound mysteries of which we are but a glimmer. And that, Fred said to me, is what we do in the theater. We tell people to look up. Yes, times can be hard. Yes, we can despair. Yes, we can yield to our anger. But we have a choice. And we can work one child at a time, one audience at a time, one community at a time. In a world where now complex ideas are reduced to sound bites, where politicians now operate in a win-lose, winner-take-all dynamic, and in which we are encouraged day after day after day to surround ourselves with people who think like us and visit websites that think like us and view others with difference with hostility and suspicion and disdain, theater offers us an alternative. Theater, in light of soundbite, thrives on complexity of meaning, nuance, depth of thought, shades of gray. As opposed to competitive dynamics, we operate out of collaboration. It's the way the work is made and the way you as the audience bring it to fruition through your laughter or your tears or your shocked silence. And especially now in a time when we're encouraged to surround ourselves and ignore difference, theater at its very best brings people not like each other to look at their fellow human being with openness and generosity and curiosity. If we have ever, as a nation, needed that capacity, we need it today. It is this belief, I think, that brought Preston and Rich to Greensboro almost 20 years ago. It is this belief that has kept them stubbornly moving forward even in the hardest of times. And I hope it is this belief which has brought you here tonight in your support of Rich and Triad Stage, because you know as you support this company, you are saying to your neighbors, to your co-workers, to your children, look up, look up, look up. I salute all of you as activists on behalf of Greensboro through your support of Triad Stage, making this a community pledged to compassion and empathy and hope. Rich, I especially salute you for everything you have done. What a remarkable thing you have made, but always for being the first to look up even while you were looking forward, just as we all look forward to whatever the next chapter of your life will bring. And I salute and thank you all not only for allowing me to be part of this remarkable celebration of Rich, but for your kindness and your patience in listening to me this evening. Thank you all, and Godspeed.